The explosion tore through the penthouse wall, sending debris and fire raining down as Victoria gripped the panic room controls, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the security monitors, she watched armed mercenaries pour through the breach like deadly shadows, their weapons trained on every corner. But what made her blood run cold wasn't the invasion, it was the monitor showing Jaehyun's location at the warehouse, surrounded by armed men with explosive charges counting down on the screen. 3 minutes, 42 seconds. Jaehyun, they're in the building. Victoria shouted into the communication headset, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. And you have less than 4 minutes before that warehouse explodes. I know. His voice came through crackling with static and gunfire. Which is why you need to listen very carefully, Victoria. In 30 seconds, every system in that penthouse is going to shut down, lights, monitors, communications, everything. What? Why would you? Because Minseek is tracking us through those systems. The moment everything goes dark, you're going to open the panic room door and run. His tone left no room for argument, but Victoria felt rebellion surge through her. I'm 6 months pregnant and there are mercenaries in your apartment. Where exactly am I supposed to run? To the secondary exit I'm transmitting to your phone now. It leads to the building next door. A pause filled with the sound of breaking glass and shouted commands. Trust me, little dove. I didn't save you from a cliff just to lose you to hired guns. The tenderness beneath his urgency made Victoria's chest ache. What about you? I'll be right behind you. But first, I'm going to make sure Minseek understands what happens when you threaten my family. The word family hit Victoria like a physical touch, warm and claiming and terrifying all at once. She'd known Jaehyun for less than 48 hours, but somewhere between the cliff rescue and this moment, they become something she didn't have words for. 20 seconds, Jaehyun said, and Victoria could hear him moving, the rhythm of his breathing controlled despite the chaos around him. Remember, the moment the lights go out, you run. Don't look back, don't hesitate, don't try to be a hero. That's rich coming from someone currently trapped in an exploding warehouse, Victoria shot back, but her fingers were already moving over the panic room controls, preparing for what came next. 15 seconds. Victoria? Yes? When this is over, when we're both safe and Minseek is nothing but a bad memory. His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the violence surrounding them both. I'm going to kiss you properly. No interruptions, no emergencies, just you and me and all the time in the world. Victoria's breath caught. Is that a promise? It's a guarantee. 10 seconds. Get ready to run. The countdown seemed to stretch into eternity. Victoria's hand hovered over the panic room release, her other hand protective over her belly where the baby was kicking frantically, as if sensing the danger. Through the monitors, she watched the mercenaries systematically clearing rooms, getting closer to her location with every passing second. 5, 4, 3. Jaehyun's count was steady, calm, the voice of someone who'd faced death so many times it no longer frightened him. 2, 1. Go. The world plunged into absolute darkness. For a heartbeat, Victoria froze, her eyes struggling to adjust. Then survival instinct kicked in and she slammed her hand on the panic room release. The door hissed open, and she stumbled out into the pitch-black penthouse, her phone's flashlight the only source of illumination in the oppressive darkness. If you're already on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that like button. This story is about to get even more intense. Behind her, Victoria could hear the mercenaries shouting in confusion, their night vision equipment apparently affected by whatever Jaehyun had done to the building systems. She followed the route on her phone's map app, her free hand trailing along the wall for balance as she navigated through the familiar yet foreign landscape of the darkened apartment. The baby kicked hard, and Victoria pressed her hand against her belly. I know, sweetheart, she whispered. Mama's scared too. But we're going to be okay. Your daddy promised. The word felt strange but right on her tongue. Biological father or not, Jaehyun had claimed this child as his the moment he'd pulled them both to safety on that cliff. And Victoria was done pretending that didn't mean everything to her. A beam of light swept across the hallway ahead, and Victoria's heart stopped. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath as heavy footsteps approached her position. Grid section 4 clear, a voice said in accented Korean. No sign of the target. Keep searching, another voice responded. Boss wants her alive if possible, but dead works too. Victoria's hand tightened on her phone, her mind racing. The exit was just around the corner, but these mercenaries were between her and freedom. She could try to wait them out, but sooner or later the building systems would come back online and they'd find her instantly. Which meant she needed a distraction. Her eyes landed on an expensive vase on a nearby table, one of the many priceless artifacts Jae-hyun collected. Under normal circumstances, Victoria would never dream of destroying something so valuable. But these weren't normal circumstances. She grabbed the vase and hurled it down the opposite hallway with all her strength. The crash was spectacular, echoing through the silent penthouse like a bomb. Immediately, the mercenaries' lights swung away from her position, their boots pounding toward the sound. Target located. Grid section 6. Move. 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 Victoria didn't wait to see if they'd fallen for it. She ran, as much as a 6-month pregnant woman could run, toward the exit route Jae-hyun had marked. Her breathing was ragged, her body protesting the sudden exertion, but fear drove her forward. The hidden door was exactly where Jae-hyun had indicated, concealed behind a panel that looked like solid wall. Victoria's fingers fumbled with the release mechanism, precious seconds ticking away as she heard the mercenaries realize their mistake and start spreading out to search again. Finally, the panel clicked open, revealing a narrow passage that connected to the adjacent building. Victoria squeezed through, her pregnant belly barely fitting, and sealed the door behind her just as she heard footsteps approaching her previous position. The passage was dark and cramped and smelled of concrete and old metal, but it was safe. For now. Victoria leaned against the wall, her hand on her racing heart, trying to catch her breath. Through her communication headset, still miraculously functional, she could hear chaos, gunfire, explosions, shouted commands in multiple languages. Jae-hyun, she whispered into the mic, I'm out. I'm safe. Static answered her, broken and ominous. Then, just as panic started to claw at her throat again, his voice came through, rough but alive, good girl. Stay in the passage. My people are converging on your location. What about you? That timer. Disarmed with 40 seconds to spare. Turns out Minseek's people aren't as good at explosive devices as they think. There was grim satisfaction in his voice. But we've got bigger problems now. What kind of problems? The kind where Minseek just mobilized every corrupt cop and paid mercenary in Seoul. He's not playing games anymore, Victoria. He wants you dead before sunrise, and he's willing to burn the entire city down to make it happen. The words should have terrified her. Instead, Victoria felt a cold fury settle in her chest. Then maybe it's time we stopped running and started fighting back. She heard Jae-hyun's low laugh, dark and approving. That's my fierce little dove. Hold tight, I'm coming to you. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Victoria huddled in the narrow passage, listening to the sounds of battle raging in the penthouse she'd just escaped. Through the thin walls, she could hear the soul dragons arriving to defend their territory, turning Jae-hyun's home into a war zone. Finally, footsteps approached her position from the adjacent building side, lighter than the mercenaries, more purposeful. Victoria tensed, preparing to run despite having nowhere to go, when the passage door opened to reveal Jae-hyun himself. He looked like he'd been through hell, suit torn, scars standing out starkly against his dirt-smudged face, blood on his hands that she desperately hoped wasn't his own. But he was alive, solid, real, and the relief that flooded Victoria was so powerful it made her knees weak. Hey, he said softly, his dark eyes scanning her from head to toe, checking for injuries. You okay? Am I okay? Victoria's voice came out higher than intended. You were in an exploding warehouse surrounded by armed men, and you're asking if I'm okay? You're 6 months pregnant and just escaped a mercenary assault. Yes, I'm asking if you're okay. He stepped closer, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. Answer the question, Victoria. The tenderness in his touch, the genuine concern in his eyes, broke something open in Victoria's chest. I'm terrified, she whispered. I'm exhausted and scared and I have no idea how we're going to survive this. But as long as you're here. She placed her hands over his, holding him to her. I'm okay. Jae-hyun's expression softened, and for a moment the dangerous mafia boss disappeared, leaving just a man looking at a woman like she was his entire world. I'm going to keep you safe, he promised. You and our baby. No matter what it takes. Our baby, Victoria repeated, her heart catching on the possessive claim. You really mean that, don't you? Even though biologically. Biology doesn't make a father. Choice does. Protection does. Love does. He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. And I choose you both. I choose this family we're building from the ashes of your past and my darkness. I choose us. Victoria's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Wait until you hear my wedding vows, Jae-hyun said with a small smile. They're going to wreck you. Wedding? Victoria's breath caught. You're serious about this? About us? Deadly serious. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. But first, we need to finish what Min-sik started. And this time, we're not just defending, we're attacking. The shift in his tone was subtle but unmistakable, the gentle lover transforming back into the strategic commander. What did you have in mind? Min-sik made a critical mistake tonight. He showed his entire hand, every ally, every resource, every dirty secret he was trying to hide. The evidence we gathered from the warehouse combined with what you released to the media means his legitimate business facade is crumbling. Jae-hyun's smile turned predatory. But we can accelerate that collapse. Make it so catastrophic that he has nowhere to run and no one willing to shelter him. How? By hitting him where it really hurts, his engagement to the Choi heiress. If we can prove to her family that Min-sik tried to murder his pregnant girlfriend, they'll not only cancel the engagement but turn their considerable resources against him. The Choi family doesn't tolerate scandals. An attempted murder of a pregnant woman is about as scandalous as it gets. Victoria's mind was already racing ahead, seeing the possibilities. We have evidence, my injuries, the medical records from tonight, your surveillance footage of him pushing me off the cliff. Exactly. Plus testimony from witnesses, financial records of the hit he put out on you, and recorded communications between him and the mercenaries. Jae-hyun pulled out his phone, showing her a folder bulging with files. Everything we need to destroy him completely. When do we move? Tomorrow. The Choi family is hosting a charity gala, one of those high society events where Seoul's elite pretend to care about causes while really just networking. Min-sik will be there with his fiancée, playing the perfect devoted partner. His eyes met Victoria's. And we're going to expose him in front of everyone who matters. The plan was audacious, risky, and absolutely brilliant. You want to bring me to a public event where Min-sik and his allies will be? While I'm 6 months pregnant and he's actively trying to kill me? I want to show Seoul's elite exactly what kind of monster they've been doing business with. Nothing speaks louder than a living, breathing victim. Jae-hyun's expression turned serious. But only if you're willing. I won't force you to face him again if you're not ready. Victoria thought about the months of abuse she'd endured, the lies Min-sik had told, the way he tried to erase her and their child like they were nothing more than inconvenient mistakes. Thought about the missing persons report he'd filed, painting her as mentally unstable and dangerous. Thought about how many other women he might victimize if someone didn't stop him. I'm ready, she said firmly. I'm done hiding and running. It's time Min-sik faced consequences. Jae-hyun's answering smile was fierce and proud. That's my girl. They spent the rest of the night in one of Jae-hyun's many safe houses, a modest apartment in Itaewon that looked nothing like his usual luxurious standards but was apparently equipped with military-grade security. As dawn broke over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Victoria found herself standing at the window watching the city wake up. Can't sleep? Jae-hyun asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of tea. Too much adrenaline still. Victoria accepted the cup gratefully, the warmth seeping into her hands. Plus, the baby's been doing gymnastics for the past hour. May I? Jae-hyun gestured toward her belly, and at Victoria's nod, he placed his large hand gently over where their child was moving. His expression transformed into wonder as he felt the kicks. Strong, he murmured. Going to be a fighter, just like their mother. Or their father, Victoria said softly. The one who's choosing to be their father. They stood like that for a long moment, connected by his hand on her belly and the life growing between them. Then Jae-hyun spoke, his voice rough with emotion he usually kept locked away. I need to tell you something about why I'm really doing this. Why Min-sik's crimes hit so close to home. Victoria waited, sensing this was important. My sister, Min-ji, she wasn't killed by strangers. She was murdered by her boyfriend when she told him she was pregnant. He was married, wealthy, connected, exactly like Min-sik. And when she threatened to expose him, he had her beaten until she lost the baby and bled to death. Jae-hyun's jaw clenched. The official investigation concluded it was a tragic accident. His money and connections made sure of it. Oh, Jae-hyun. Victoria's heart broke for him, for the sister he'd lost, for the justice that had been denied. I spent years trying to bring him down through legal channels. Every lawyer, every judge, every politician I approached, they were all either bought off or too scared to act. That's when I realized the system wasn't designed to deliver justice to people like Min-ji. It was designed to protect people like her killer. His dark eyes met Victoria's. So I built something outside the system. Something that could deliver the justice the courts wouldn't. The Soul Dragons. Started as a way to investigate my sister's killer, gather evidence the police ignored, and eventually ensure he faced consequences for what he did. Jae-hyun's expression was distant, remembering. By the time I had enough to destroy him, I'd built an entire organization dedicated to handling the cases the system failed, protecting the vulnerable, punishing the powerful who thought themselves untouchable. Victoria understood now why he'd saved her so readily, why her situation had triggered such a fierce protective response. What happened to him? Your sister's killer? He disappeared 3 years ago. Officially declared missing, presumed dead. Jae-hyun's tone was carefully neutral. The investigation went nowhere. Victoria didn't ask for details. Some questions were better left unspoken. Instead, she squeezed his hand. Min-ji would be proud of what you've built. The people you've helped, the justice you've delivered when no one else would. I hope so. Jae-hyun turned to face her fully. But I also hope she'd approve of this, of us. Of me finding something worth protecting instead of just things worth destroying. Is that what I am? Something worth protecting? You're everything worth protecting. His hand came up to cradle her face. You're the future I didn't know I was allowed to want. The kiss was inevitable, necessary, a claiming and a promise all at once. Jae-hyun's lips moved over Victoria's with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence he was capable of, and she melted into his arms despite her pregnant belly between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria felt heat flush her skin. You promised me a proper kiss with no interruptions, she murmured against his mouth. This is just a preview. Jae-hyun's voice was rough with desire. After the gala, after Min-sik is dealt with, I'm going to kiss you the way I've been dreaming about since I caught you falling from that cliff. The promise in his words made Victoria shiver with anticipation. But before she could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent alert. What now? Victoria asked, recognizing the tension that immediately filled Jae-hyun's body. The Choi family moved the gala up. It's tonight instead of tomorrow. He cursed in Korean. Min-sik must have convinced them to accelerate the timeline, probably wants to finalize the engagement before more evidence against him goes public. So we have less than 12 hours to prepare. Exactly. Jae-hyun was already moving, his strategic mind shifting into high gear. Which means we need to move fast. Can you be ready? Victoria thought about everything she'd survived in the past 48 hours, attempted murder, abuse, betrayal, explosions, mercenary assaults. One more night of danger seemed almost manageable in comparison. I can be ready, she said firmly. What do you need me to do? The preparation that followed was intense and meticulous. Jae-hyun's people brought Victoria an elegant maternity gown in deep emerald green that somehow managed to make her look regal rather than just pregnant. A stylist did her hair and makeup, transforming her from a woman on the run into someone who could walk into Seoul's most exclusive gala with confidence. "You look stunning," Jae-hyun said when he saw her, and the heat in his eyes made Victoria's breath catch. He'd cleaned up too, trading his battle-worn tactical gear for an immaculate black suit that emphasized his dangerous elegance. The scar on his face somehow added to rather than detracted from his appeal, and his visible tattoos were carefully concealed beneath expensive fabric. "We look like we actually belong at a high society event," Victoria observed. "Looks can be deceiving." Jae-hyun's smile was sharp. "We're wolves in sheep's clothing, little dove. And tonight, we hunt." The Choi family's estate was a monument to old money and traditional power, sprawling gardens, classical architecture, and security so tight that even Jae-hyun's connections were tested getting them through the gates. But his legitimate business persona provided enough cover, and soon they were walking into a ballroom filled with Seoul's elite. "Stay close to me," Jae-hyun murmured, his hand protective at the small of Victoria's back. "Min-seek's here, I can see him near the main reception area with his fiancé." Victoria's heart hammered, but she forced herself to look. There he was, Kang Min-seek, looking handsome and charming in his designer suit, his arm around a beautiful young woman who must be the Choi heiress. He was laughing at something she'd said, playing the role of devoted fiancé with practiced ease. The same man who'd pushed her off a cliff less than 3 days ago. Rage flooded Victoria, white-hot and energizing. "What's our first move?" "We circulate, let people see you." The resemblance to the missing woman Min-seek reported will raise questions, especially given your obvious pregnancy. Jae-hyun guided her toward a group of business executives. "Let the rumors start spreading, make him sweat wondering when we'll strike. Make sure you're subscribed because this confrontation is about to get explosive. Drop a comment telling me what you think Victoria should say when she faces Min-seek." The strategy worked perfectly. Within minutes of their arrival, Victoria could feel eyes tracking her movement through the ballroom. Whispered conversations followed in their wake, and she caught fragments as people recognized her from the news coverage about Min-seek's missing girlfriend. "Isn't that? She looks just like the woman in those photos. But she's here with Jae-hyun Park? The Soul Dragon's boss? This is going to be interesting." Across the ballroom, Victoria saw the moment Min-seek spotted her. His face went white, then red, his charming smile freezing into something grotesque. His fiancée noticed his reaction and followed his gaze, her delicate features creasing with confusion. "He's seen us," Victoria murmured to Jae-hyun. "Good. Let him come to us or let him panic trying to avoid us. Either way, he loses." Jae-hyun accepted 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter, handing one to Victoria. "Don't drink it, just hold it for appearance's sake." They didn't have to wait long. Min-seek appeared to make a decision, his face smoothing back into his public mask as he began making his way toward them, his fiancée on his arm. "He's coming over," Victoria said, her pulse racing. "Remember, stay calm, let him dig his own grave with his lies. We have all the evidence, all we need to do is give him enough rope to hang himself." Jae-hyun's voice was low and reassuring. "I'm right here. He can't hurt you anymore." Min-seek approached with his characteristic confidence, though Victoria could see the strain around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hand as he adjusted his tie. "Jae-hyun," he said smoothly, extending a hand that Jae-hyun pointedly ignored. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Life is full of surprises," Jae-hyun replied, his tone arctic. Min-seek's eyes slid to Victoria, and she saw genuine shock beneath his composed exterior. "And you've brought a guest. How unexpected." "Unexpected?" Victoria found her voice, and it came out stronger than she'd dared hope. "Is that what you're calling it?" "Victoria." Min-seek's voice dropped, taking on the cajoling tone she remembered from better days. "I'm so glad you're safe. When you disappeared, I was so worried. The police are still looking for you." "Are they looking for a mentally unstable woman who attacked her boyfriend?" Victoria cut him off, her voice carrying just far enough for nearby guests to hear. "Because that's the story you told them, isn't it?" Min-seek's fiancée, a lovely young woman in a white cocktail dress, looked between them with growing confusion. "Min-seek? What is she talking about?" "This is Ji-eun Choi," Min-seek said, his hand tightening possessively on his fiancée's arm. My fiancé. Victoria is, she's someone I used to know. Someone who's been going through a difficult time. A difficult time? Victoria's laugh was sharp with disbelief. Is that what you call attempted murder now? The words hung in the air like a bomb, and conversations around them began to quiet as people realized something dramatic was unfolding. Ji-eun's eyes widened, and she took a small step away from Min-sik. Victoria, please, Min-sik said, his voice taking on a pleading quality clearly intended for their growing audience. I understand you're upset about our breakup, but making wild accusations isn't going to help your mental state. 3 nights ago, Victoria spoke over him, her voice clear and strong. You pushed me off Songsan Cliff while I was 6 months pregnant with your child. You told me that we were inconvenient to your business engagement, and the easiest solution was for us to disappear. Ji-eun gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Around them, the quiet had spread like ripples in a pond, guests turning to stare at the unfolding drama. That's a serious accusation, Min-sik stammered, his composure finally cracking. You have no proof. Actually, Jae-hyun spoke up, his voice cutting through the murmurs, we have extensive proof. Surveillance footage of you pushing Victoria off the cliff. Medical records documenting her injuries from the fall and the previous abuse. Financial records of the hit you put out on her. Recorded communications between you and the mercenaries you hired to finish the job when she survived. He pulled out a tablet, and with a few taps, a large screen in the ballroom flickered to life. Apparently, Jae-hyun had arranged for access to the venue's AV system. The footage began to play, Min-sik at the cliff's edge, Victoria pleading with him, his cold eyes as he shoved her backward. The ballroom erupted in shocked gasps and horrified murmurs. Ji-eun stumbled backward, tears streaming down her face as she stared at her fiancé with betrayed eyes. You told me you were single, she whispered. You said there was no one else. Ji-eun, please, this isn't what it looks like. Min-sik reached for her, but she recoiled from his touch. You're pregnant? Ji-eun's eyes went to Victoria's obvious belly. With his baby? And he tried to, oh my god. Victoria placed a protective hand over her stomach, meeting the other woman's horrified gaze. I didn't know about you until it was too late. He lied to both of us. That's enough. Min-sik's voice rose sharply, his mask fully shattered now. You can't just come in here and destroy my life based on fabricated evidence. Fabricated? An older man stepped forward from the crowd. Victoria recognized him from photos as Chairman Choi, Ji-eun's father and one of Seoul's most powerful businessmen. Are you saying this footage is fake? It must be. She's clearly working with Jae-hyun, who has every reason to want to destroy my family's business interests. Your family's criminal interests, Jae-hyun corrected coldly. He tapped the tablet again, and new documents appeared on the screen, shipping manifests, financial records, communications detailing arms dealing and money laundering. Everything here is verified and has already been submitted to the appropriate authorities. By tomorrow morning, prosecutors will have more than enough to indict not just you, but your father and every associate who's been helping you run illegal weapons through the port of Incheon. Chairman Choi's face had gone dangerously red. You brought this criminal enterprise into an engagement with my daughter? You endangered my family's reputation with your illegal activities? Chairman Choi, I can explain, Min-sik started, but the older man held up a hand. The engagement is cancelled. Effective immediately. He turned to his daughter, his voice softening. Ji-eun, go with your mother. You don't need to hear any more of this. But Ji-eun didn't move. Instead, she walked directly to Victoria, her eyes red with tears but her voice steady. I'm so sorry. If I'd known what he was capable of, I would never have agreed to marry him. You didn't know, Victoria said gently. Neither of us did. That's what men like him do, they show you the person they want you to see until it's too late to escape easily. Ji-eun nodded, then looked at Victoria's belly. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? We're survivors, Victoria said, her hand protective over her stomach. We're going to be fine. The younger woman reached out to squeeze Victoria's hand briefly, a moment of solidarity between two women betrayed by the same man. Then she turned and walked away, her mother rushing to her side. Minsik watched his carefully constructed future crumble around him with undisguised rage. When his eyes turned back to Victoria, there was pure hatred in them. "You've destroyed everything," he snarled, all pretense of civility abandoned. "Everything I worked for, everything my family built. Everything you stole and killed for," Victoria corrected. "I'm just making sure the world knows the truth about what you are." "You think this is over?" Minsik's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "You think exposing me at some party changes anything? My family still has power, still has resources." "Had," Jae-hyun interrupted. Past tense. "While we've been talking, prosecutors have been executing search warrants at your family's offices, warehouses, and properties. Your father is currently being arrested, as are most of your key associates. The Kang Empire is finished." The words hit Minsik like physical blows. Victoria watched the realization dawn on his face. He'd lost. Completely, irrevocably lost. Everything he'd tried to protect by eliminating her was gone anyway. "This is your fault," he said, lunging toward Victoria with violent intent clear in his eyes. "You ruined everything." He never made it within 5 feet of her. Jae-hyun moved with deadly precision, intercepting Minsik and slamming him to the marble floor hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Security guards rushed forward, but Jae-hyun was already hauling Minsik up by his expensive suit collar. "You tried to kill a pregnant woman," Jae-hyun said, his voice deadly quiet but carrying through the silent ballroom. "You abused her, terrorized her, and when she became inconvenient to your business plans, you decided murder was easier than taking responsibility. Now the entire city knows exactly what kind of monster you are." He released Minsik with a shove that sent him stumbling into the waiting arms of actual police officers, not the corrupt ones on the Kang payroll, but prosecutors investigators who'd apparently been waiting for exactly this moment. "Kang Minsik," one of them said formally, "you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, illegal arms trafficking, money laundering, and domestic assault. You have the right to remain silent." Victoria watched them lead him away in handcuffs, his protests and threats fading as he was removed from the ballroom. Around them, Seoul's elite buzzed with shock and scandal, their phones already out to spread the gossip that would dominate tomorrow's news cycle. "How do you feel?" Jae-hyun asked quietly, his hand finding Victoria's. Victoria took a moment to check in with herself, her racing heart, her protective hand on her belly, the weight that had been lifted from her shoulders. "Free," she said finally. "For the first time since I met him, I feel completely free." "Good." Jae-hyun pressed a kiss to her temple, careful of their very public audience. "Because now we get to start the next chapter." The next chapter began that very night. After making their excuses to leave the gala, which had devolved into barely contained chaos as prosecutors continued to arrive and wealthy guests scrambled to distance themselves from the Kang family scandal, Jae-hyun drove Victoria to yet another property she hadn't known existed. This one was different from the safe houses and secure apartments, a beautiful traditional hanok house on the outskirts of Seoul, with a garden and a view of the mountains. It was peaceful, private, and absolutely breathtaking in the moonlight. "What is this place?" Victoria asked as Jae-hyun helped her from the car. "Somewhere I bought years ago thinking I'd use it as a retreat but never did. Seemed like a waste to have a house meant for family when I didn't have one." He looked at her, his expression soft in the darkness. "But now I do." The simple words made Victoria's throat tight with emotion. "Jae-hyun, I want to bring you and the baby here after everything is settled. Not as a safe house or a hiding place, but as a home. Somewhere we can build a life together away from the violence and chaos." He cupped her face in his hands. "Somewhere we can just be a family." "That sounds perfect," Victoria whispered, then smiled slightly. "Though I should probably point out that we've known each other for less than 3 days. Some people might say we're moving a bit fast. Some people didn't save you from falling off a cliff and then survive multiple assassination attempts together. I think we've earned the right to skip some of the traditional relationship steps." His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "Unless you need more time. I don't want to pressure you into anything you're not ready for." Victoria thought about the whirlwind of the past few days, the terror, the trust, the growing feelings that had developed between life and death moments. In any other circumstance, agreeing to build a life with someone she barely knew would be insane. But nothing about their situation was normal, and Victoria had learned that sometimes the most important truths revealed themselves quickly when survival was at stake. "I don't need more time," she said firmly. "I need you. I need this. I need us." The kiss Jae-hyun gave her then was everything he'd promised, deep, thorough, claiming, with no interruptions or emergencies to cut it short. Victoria melted into his arms, her hands fisting in his suit jacket as his mouth moved over hers with barely restrained passion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jae-hyun rested his forehead against hers. "I promised myself I'd wait until everything was safe," he murmured. "Until all the threats were eliminated and you could make decisions without fear influencing you. I'm making this decision because of love, not fear," Victoria assured him. "You showed me what it means to be valued, protected, treated like an equal partner instead of a possession. You've given me more in 3 days than Min-sik gave me in 3 months. That's a low bar, little dove. Then let me raise it." Victoria pulled back to look into his eyes. "You've shown me what real love looks like. What it means to have someone choose me and my baby not because they have to, but because they genuinely want to. That's not a small thing, Jae-hyun. That's everything." His eyes went suspiciously bright, and he pulled her close again, careful of her belly between them. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I know." Victoria's hand came up to trace the scar on his face, this mark of his violent life that somehow made him more beautiful to her. "And I'm going to spend the rest of mine making sure you never regret saving me from that cliff." They spent the night in the Hanok house, talking about the future they'd build together, making plans for after the baby arrived, discussing how to merge Jae-hyun's dangerous world with the safe, stable life Victoria wanted for their child. It wasn't going to be easy, nothing about their situation was easy, but for the first time, Victoria felt genuine hope for what came next. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media coverage, and careful transition. The Kang family empire collapsed spectacularly, taking down dozens of corrupt officials and criminal associates with it. Min-sik and his father both faced extensive prison sentences, and the evidence Jae-hyun had gathered became the basis for one of the largest criminal prosecutions in Seoul's history. Victoria found herself at the center of a media storm, cast as the brave victim who'd stood up to her abuser and exposed a criminal dynasty. She gave carefully controlled interviews, using her platform to talk about domestic violence and the importance of believing victims when they came forward. The pregnancy added an emotional dimension to her story that resonated with audiences across Korea and beyond. Through it all, Jae-hyun remained her steady support, protective but not controlling, present but not overbearing. He dealt with the Seoul Dragon's business that required his attention while making sure Victoria and the baby were his top priority. Watching him transform from feared Mafia boss to devoted partner was one of the most remarkable experiences of Victoria's life. 2 months after the gala confrontation, with Victoria's belly now prominently 8 months round and Min-sik safely behind bars awaiting trial, Jae-hyun proposed properly. They were at the Hanok house, walking through the garden as autumn painted the leaves in shades of gold and crimson. Victoria was admiring the koi pond when Jae-hyun suddenly dropped to one knee beside her. "I know I already asked you to build a life with me," he said, pulling out a velvet box that contained a stunning ring, platinum band with a diamond that caught the afternoon sun like captured fire. "But I want to make it official. Victoria Chen, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my family? Will you let me be the father to your child and hopefully the father to more children in our future? Will you trust me with your heart and your life and your happiness?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at this dangerous, gentle man who'd saved her in every way possible. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes to all of it. Yes to everything." The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, and Jae-hyun rose to kiss her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they broke apart, both smiling through happy tears, Victoria felt the baby kick enthusiastically. "I think that's approval," she laughed, placing Jae-hyun's hand on her belly so he could feel their child's movements. "Strong kicks," he observed. "Definitely going to be a fighter. With parents like us, how could they be anything else?" They married quietly a week later in a small ceremony at the Hanok house, with only Jae-hyun's most trusted associates as witnesses. Victoria wore a simple white dress that accommodated her pregnancy, and Jaehyun wore a traditional Korean hanbok that somehow made him look even more handsome than his usual suits. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows a promise of protection, partnership, and love that transcended the violence and chaos that had brought them together. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and Jaehyun kissed Victoria with infinite gentleness, she felt like she'd finally found the home she'd been searching for her entire life. "Mrs. Park," Jaehyun murmured against her lips. "Mr. Park," Victoria replied with a smile. "That's going to take some getting used to. You have the rest of our lives to adjust." The rest of their lives began in earnest 3 weeks later when Victoria went into labor in the middle of the night. Jaehyun remained remarkably calm as he drove her to the private hospital he'd selected months ago, though Victoria could see the tension in his white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. "Everything's going to be fine," she assured him between contractions. "I know," he said, though his voice was tight. "It's just, bringing new life into the world feels like such a miracle after spending so many years dealing in death." The labor was long and difficult, Victoria's body struggling with the trauma it had endured during the pregnancy. But Jaehyun never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction and whispering words of encouragement in both Korean and English. "You're doing so well," he murmured during a particularly intense contraction. "You're so strong, so brave. Our daughter is going to be just like you, fierce and beautiful and absolutely unstoppable." "Daughter?" Victoria gasped. "You think it's a girl?" "I know it's a girl." His smile was soft. "I've known since the first ultrasound." He was right. When their baby finally arrived after 14 hours of labor, the doctor placed a perfect, healthy baby girl in Victoria's arms. She had her mother's beautiful features and her biological father's, dark hair, but when she opened her eyes, Victoria swore she saw Jaehyun's determined spirit looking back at her. "She's beautiful," Jaehyun whispered, tears streaming down his face as he looked at their daughter. "She's absolutely perfect. What should we name her?" Victoria asked, studying their baby's tiny features. "Minji," Jaehyun said without hesitation. "If that's okay with you. For my sister, but also for new beginnings and the chance to build something beautiful from tragedy." Victoria nodded, understanding the significance of giving their daughter the same name as Jaehyun's lost sister. "Minji Park. It's perfect." As they sat together in the hospital room, Victoria exhausted but glowing, Jaehyun cradling their newborn daughter with infinite care, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. 4 months ago, she'd been falling to certain death off a cliff, carrying the child of a man who wanted them both erased. Now she was a wife and mother, protected by a man who would move mountains to keep her safe. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jaehyun looked up from their daughter's sleeping face. "For what?" "For saving us. For loving us. For giving me a future I never thought possible." "Thank you for trusting me with your heart," he replied. "For seeing past what I am to who I could become. For making me a father and a husband and teaching me that some things are worth more than revenge and violence." Their daughter stirred in his arms, making soft cooing sounds that filled the room with warmth. Outside the hospital windows, Seoul glittered in the darkness, full of dangers and possibilities. But inside their protective bubble, nothing existed except love, hope, and the promise of tomorrow. "I love you, Mrs. Park," Jaehyun said softly. "I love you too, Mr. Park," Victoria replied, her heart full to overflowing. The months that followed were an adjustment as they learned to navigate parenthood together. Minji proved to be a strong-willed baby who rarely slept through the night and had opinions about everything from her formula temperature to which lullabies were acceptable. But watching Jaehyun transform into a devoted father was one of the greatest joys of Victoria's life. He handled midnight feedings with the same focus he brought to business negotiations, mastered diaper changes with military precision, and spoke to their daughter in both Korean and English, determined she'd grow up bilingual. The feared Mafia boss became utterly helpless in the face of Minji's tears, and his associates learned quickly that meetings could be interrupted if his daughter needed him. "You've gone soft," one of his lieutenants teased during a video call that Minji interrupted with her crying. "I found something worth being soft for," Jaehyun replied without shame, already moving to comfort his daughter. "Besides, anyone who underestimates me because I'm a devoted father is going to learn a painful lesson about assumptions." Victoria watched him rock Minji with practiced ease, and her heart swelled with love for this man who'd saved her life and then shown her what it meant to truly live. 6 months after Minji's birth, the legal proceedings against Minsik finally concluded. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder, domestic violence, and his role in the Kang family's criminal operations. His father received an even longer sentence, and the family's business empire was completely dismantled. Victoria attended the sentencing with Jae-hyun by her side and Min-ji in her arms. When Min-sik was led into the courtroom in handcuffs, his expensive suit replaced by prison orange, she felt nothing but pity for the man who'd thrown away everything for greed and pride. He tried to meet her eyes, but Victoria looked past him to where the judge was reading the sentence. She'd already won. She had a family who loved her, a daughter who was thriving, and a future full of possibility. Min-sik had nothing but years of regret ahead of him. As they left the courthouse, Jae-hyun pulled Victoria close. "How do you feel?" "Complete," she said simply. "That chapter is closed. Now I get to focus on the story we're writing together." Speaking of which, Jae-hyun said with a smile that made him look younger, almost mischievous. "I've been thinking about our next chapter." "Oh. I want to expand the Soul Dragon's operations. Not the criminal side, that's always going to be part of who we are, but the protection side. I want to create a formal organization that helps victims of domestic violence and abuse. Safe houses, legal assistance, protection from abusers, job training, everything they need to escape and rebuild." His eyes met hers. "Your story inspired me. I want to make sure other women have the same chance at survival and justice that you did." Victoria's throat tightened with emotion. "You want to create a victims advocacy organization? With you as the director, if you're willing. Who better to understand what survivors need than someone who's lived through it?" He shifted Min-ji in his arms. "We could call it Min-ji's Foundation, for my sister who didn't survive, and our daughter who represents the future we're building. Before you go, make sure to smash that subscribe button because this story has one final twist that will leave you speechless. Drop a comment telling me what you think happens next." Tears streamed down Victoria's face as she looked at her husband, seeing not the dangerous criminal or the feared mafia boss, but a man who'd taken his pain and transformed it into purpose. "I think that's the most beautiful idea I've ever heard." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes to everything." She kissed him softly, careful not to disturb their sleeping daughter between them. "Let's build something that changes the world." They spent the following year bringing Min-ji's foundation to life. Jae-hyun used his extensive resources and connections to secure funding, properties, and legal expertise. Victoria used her own experience and the platform she'd gained from her story to advocate for policy changes and raise awareness about domestic violence. The foundation became one of Seoul's most respected organizations, helping hundreds of women and children escape abusive situations and rebuild their lives. Victoria found purpose in her work, using her trauma as fuel to help others find the safety and justice she'd fought so hard to claim. Meanwhile, their family continued to grow in other ways. Jae-hyun gradually stepped back from the more violent aspects of the Soul Dragon's operations, delegating to trusted lieutenants while he focused on the legitimate businesses and the foundation. He never fully left his criminal empire. That world had too deep a hold on him, but he found a balance that let him be both a protector of the vulnerable and a devoted family man. Min-ji thrived, growing into a spirited toddler who had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. She learned to walk in the Hanok house's garden. Her first word was "Appa," daddy in Korean, and she showed early signs of inheriting both her mother's intelligence and her father's fierce protective instincts. 2 years after Min-ji's birth, Victoria found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was planned, celebrated, and free from the trauma and fear that had shadowed Min-ji's gestation. When they welcomed a son, Young-hoon, named for Jae-hyun's grandfather, their family felt complete in a way Victoria had never imagined possible. 2 kids, a foundation, a mafia empire to run, Jae-hyun said one evening as they watched their children play in the garden. "We've been busy. Are you complaining?" Victoria asked with a smile. "Not even a little bit." He pulled her close, his hand resting on her hip in the casual intimacy of long partnership. "I'm just amazed at how far we've come from that cliff." Victoria thought about the terrified woman falling to her death, saved by a stranger's strong arms appearing out of thin air. Thought about the journey from victim to survivor to advocate. Thought about the family they'd built from the ashes of trauma and violence. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Saving me that night? Your life was simpler before." "My life was empty before," Jaehyun interrupted firmly. "I had purpose but no joy. Revenge but no love. Power but no family." He turned her to face him, his expression intense. "You didn't complicate my life, Victoria. You completed it. Even with all the danger. The assassination attempts. The constant threat. Especially with all of that. Because it means I'm fighting for something that matters instead of just fighting." His hand came up to cup her face. "You and our children are worth every risk, every danger, every moment of fear. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." Victoria kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into the embrace. When they broke apart, both smiling, they heard Minji calling for them from the garden. "Appa. Amma. Come see what Young-hoon did." They walked hand in hand to join their children, leaving behind the darkness of their past and stepping fully into the light of their future. The story of how Victoria fell from a cliff and was saved by a stranger's strong arms had become a legend in Seoul, a reminder that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the most beautiful beginnings, and that true love really can conquer all. Years later, when Minji and Young-hoon were old enough to ask how their parents met, Victoria and Jaehyun would tell them a slightly sanitized version, a fairy tale about a brave woman who defeated a monster with the help of a dark knight, and how their love created something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. They taught their children that family isn't always about blood, that strength comes from choosing to stand up for what's right, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are found in the most dangerous places. They showed them through example what it meant to take pain and transform it into purpose, to use privilege and power to protect the vulnerable, and to never stop fighting for justice. Minji grew up to become a prosecutor, dedicating her life to putting away the kind of criminals her father had once been while working alongside him in his transformation. Young-hoon became a doctor, driven by his mother's stories of survival and his father's determination to protect life rather than take it. And if Seoul's criminal underworld occasionally whispered about the retired Seoul Dragon's boss who'd gone soft for a woman he saved from a cliff, well, those whispers always ended the same way, with a warning that anyone who threatened Jaehyun Park's family would discover exactly how dangerous a devoted father and husband could be. But that, as they say, is a story for another time. For now, in the peaceful garden of their Hanok house, surrounded by children's laughter and the promise of tomorrow, Victoria and Jaehyun held each other close and thanked whatever fate or fortune had brought them together. She'd fallen from a cliff carrying one man's baby, but she'd been caught by another man's love. And in that love, she'd found not just salvation, but the strength to transform herself from victim to survivor to warrior to advocate to mother to wife. From broken to whole. From afraid to fierce. From falling to flying. The story of Victoria and Jaehyun wasn't just a tale of revenge and romance, darkness and redemption. It was a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, partnership over possession, and hope over despair. It was proof that even in the darkest moments, when all seems lost and death feels inevitable, sometimes, just sometimes, a stranger's strong arms appear out of thin air and change everything. And sometimes, those arms don't just save you from falling. They teach you how to soar. If this epic love story moved you, show some love by hitting that like button, subscribe for more incredible tales of romance and redemption, and drop a comment telling me your favorite moment from Victoria and Jaehyun's journey. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you more stories that prove love can triumph over even the darkest circumstances. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to transform lives. Fire 2 Heart Sparkles.